AP Stats. We're doing a little podcast here in class, section 4.2b. Just a heads up, more on the check your understanding. And here we go. Okay. All right. Hey, as you're writing these down, I know that I'm kind of going into this, and I apologize if I seem like I'm like, let's get going today. We are, I don't want to say behind, but I do have a lot that I wanted to review and go over. And I've got a quick activity that I wanted just to kind of double check kind of our understanding on from the previous quiz. So let's do this. Let's talk through just a little bit about the whys here. Number one asked whether it was an experiment or not. This pulls from our podcast. So I just wanted a quick review. Why would you say that this is an experiment on number one there, Ivana?
Because they adjusted the brightness.
Yeah, they adjusted the brightness. This is good. And they also did what once they adjusted it, right? That would be like the treatment, right? The treatment was there, and then it was imposed. What does imposed mean?
Like tampered with.
Say that again, Eric.
Tampered with.
Yeah, they tampered with it, and then they did what once they tampered with it? They assign, right? Isn't that what that means? So when I impose it, I'm like assigning it. I'm putting it to someone. I'm placing individuals or subjects, placing subjects, that's the right word, into categories, right? Whatever the categories of treatments that there are, right? That would be the experiment. One thing big with an experiment, what's the power of an experiment over an observational study? Just by show of hands. Does anyone know the difference? Experimental is a huge thing we hit on in the podcast, Rita. Yeah, we're just chilling, right? That's really good. And what can we say about the entire inference of an experiment? What can we do with inference of an experiment that we cannot do with observational? Claudia? Cause and effect. That's the big thing. That's powerful. Got me? Cause and effect is experimental. If you didn't watch the podcast, that's a huge thing. Go back through and make sure that you check that out. Number two, it looks like that teenagers eat with their families at least 5 times a week, are more likely to get better grades. The finding was based on a sample survey. That's a huge part. Was this an observational or an experimental? You know?
Observational.
Why is that?
Because no variable was acted upon.
Yeah, so we just simply chilled back and watched, right? We didn't impose or put in a treatment. We simply chilled back and just observed what was going on. So there was no assigning or imposing, right? What Eric was talking about, to eat with their families. If we did do that, then we would take this random group of people, and then we would simply randomly assign one to one family where they would be with their family and one where they wouldn't eat with their family. That would be more of an experimental. Explanatory and response, you'll see. Explanatory is whether they eat with their families at least 5 times a week. The response was simply the grades, okay? All right, it then says, explain clearly why such a study cannot establish cause and effect. Without looking up here, someone help me out with how we would respond to this. Grace?
You can't say it directly affects the grades, eating with your family, because there are other variables that may come in.
Bingo. What do we call those variables?
Confounding.
Nice, that's perfect. Yeah, we've got confounding variables that are here. Can we control those? The answer is no, because we're not treating, or there's no treatment that's there. There's no random assignment. This is just simply a random sample, and we'll talk about the difference today within that, okay? So we can't say this because teens who eat with families may have something in common that affects their grades. Other than that, like a healthy diet, right? There could be other things that could be confounding variables that correlate these people together, that kind of are similarities that affect it more than just eating with their families, okay? All right, how do we feel? Those that watched the podcast, did you have any major questions on that? All right, there was one thing that I had a question on that I wanted to show you. Random sample versus random assignment. Can someone just, here's the picture of it. Is there anyone that just can kind of explain to me what the difference is between those two for 4 tickets? Eric, and then I'll go to Ivana because you've been rocking it.
Taking a random sample is just like out of a whole population, taking it like choosing at random like not like assigning them to categories and then like.
Yeah, so this would be from the entire population. I like that. Also, just so you know, this would be anything with an observational that takes an SRS, right? That could be stratified. That also could be clustered. Okay. So this would be observational. And then what's random assignment? Eric?
It's like grouping people into different categories.
Good, yeah, so we put them into different categories where maybe one group we impose a treatment, and the other group what do we give the other group? Okay, so say this again. Placebo or a control group, right? Does it matter which one I use? Maybe depending on the context of what we're doing. But whether it's a control group or whether it's just simply a placebo, I could see both. Okay? All right, so question, what is a control group? What's a control group, Torrance? Yeah, so it's something that nothing has been altered in, right? It's something that we just simply observe, and we're just saying, okay, they have no treatment, whereas the other one does have treatment. I said observe, that's a bad word. I don't want to use that here. I meant we don't impose any treatment on them, right? They're just going through the motions, and we're just seeing whether the treatment does in fact impact whatever we're trying to experiment on, all right? How do we feel on this? Y'all feel Gucci? Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to look at, we're going to skip this because I feel good on this part. Okay, we're going to have some fun with this here. All right, here we go. How many of you love these fruit snacks? Good right here? Ooh.
That's a great
All right, this box is empty, so I want each person, do not open them yet because I want to use the illustration, then you can eat them. All right, so real quick, take one of each. Take one of each here. Here you go, Tony.
Grace.
Oh,
Full of purple.
I wish there was purple.
all this air.
If you don't want to eat them, you can give them to someone else, but each of us needs one of these, okay?
Oh, they're Halloween.
Okay. All right, look right here. Look up here at me. All right, here we go. Real quick. Let's talk about the cloud real quick. I love that word. It's a cloud, all right? Let's look at the cloud. What do we know about the cloud? Give me one thing that we filled in before. Populations in the cloud. Well, how do we describe mean? Mu is mean. We also have something that looks like,
Sample.
yep, this is a sample. And we know that the mean would be x bar. What's up, Wayne? Good to see you. X bar. Good. Someone else tell me something else that we've kind of labeled around the cloud.
Volunteers.
And what do we represent that with, Ryan? Yeah, like we have
Like
a square. Basically, these are things that create bias, right? We talked about how these create bias, but the way that they're sampled are the ways that it creates bias, right? So voluntary, we have
Convenient.
convenience. Is there another one? I think that was it, right? But they create different forms of bias here, okay? Yvonne?
The little circles for cluster.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so this is where I want to kind of go here. I want you to put little clouds, or if you just want to watch here because you've done this before, that's fine. Each of these represents a little cloud, okay? All right, I know, I take you. So cute. So what we're going to do here is if I decided to sample the proportion of Welch's fruit snacks that that were grape or that were cherry, whatever the flavors are in here. If we did cluster, then I would randomly select one of these or a couple of these, and what would I do in sampling inside here? I would sample every single one. Does that make sense? So each of these clouds is a pack, and if I say, okay, random, I've got to do it randomly, I'm randomly going to select, let's say 3 of them in this classroom, or however many that there are. I would then select all of them, or would select one of them, and then sample all of the proportions that are on the inside. Okay? What's up, Jeff?
Come on, Jeff.
Cool. Does that make sense? Cool? This is cluster. So the whole thing. Now, could someone tell me how I could use the same illustration and take my population? We're going to say the population are all the fruit snacks within this box. How could I do a stratified random sample and finding the proportion of, we'll say, cherry within this box? Does anyone have an idea of how we would execute that?
Yeah.
So this represents the population. Someone raise their hand and help me. Josh, were you saying something?
Sure.
Take it, go.
I could be completely wrong. We'll start with that. But you get like maybe a few pouches or maybe even one and get the percentage of cherry within the pouch,
Okay.
possibly. And then
So that right there would be more of a cluster because you did everyone in that pouch. Does that make sense? Or however many pouches we have. But if I did a stratified, where the stratas, the groups are each package, right?
You could do how many cherries are in each.
Not quite, because that would be my entire population, right? How could I do it if I was just sampling? When did you? I saw your hand raised first. Which one?
Put them in strata based on the color.
Okay, well, these are the groups, right? Each one of these. So if I did stratified, right, then I am dividing each of these within the stratas of the different pouches that are there. Ivana, do you have a thought?
Can you just like label each one of the packages and then get some like randomize, you know, and like get them and then I don't know, you pick like 7 and then you figure out how many cherries are in like each one. You said cherry, right?
I would say that if I did that, that would be cluster because you're sampling everyone within each pouch.
Okay, but if I open the package.
So each pouch, right? If I randomly selected 7 of these, right? Hey, because this is important, and this is where we struggled a little bit. On the quiz, we did well on the quiz, but I want to make sure we get this. That's why we're having food with it, all right? You're like, just let me eat it. I know. So let's say that I randomly selected, I lined all of these pouches up. I randomly selected 7 of them, took all those gummies, and then found the proportion of cherry. That's cluster. Cool? Stratified, we got to be careful because stratified, each of these is a part of the strat, right? A different part of the group. If we did stratified, that means that I would have to sample from each pouch, right?
Can you just like take one from each and see how many your cherries?
1. We could maybe do 2 at random, 3 at random, whatever we think, right? But each pouch we would have to take a what? An SRS, great job. An SRS would have to be taken from each pouch, which is the best method. I would say cluster because it would be much easier to just randomly select 7, 8 pouches, sample everything inside rather than opening up everyone and then taking an SRS of each. Okay? Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Hey, do this for this next part. Check out this video while you're eating this, and hold up, that's not what I want. All right, check this out. I love this video, and pretty cool. Kind of explains where we're going today.
Continues on this network. ABC's Nick Watt, the host of a great new show, Would You Fall for That, joins us now from Los Angeles. And Nick, tonight you are putting the placebo effect we hear so much about to the test.
That's right, Josh. I mean, you know that we're all about science on this show. Well, not quite. It's a lot of fun as well. Tonight, the placebo effect. If you think something's going to make you feel better, then it might. And it's summertime, so for this one, we headed to the beach.
We set up a booth on the boardwalk at the beautiful Jersey Shore one sweltering hot day. We told vacationers we're shooting an infomercial for a fabulous new energy drink. We had t-shirts and posters. We even had our very own Whip Power energy drink banner flash. Oh, and one tiny little secret. Whip, nothing more, club soda. If you believe a pill will make you better, then it just might. If you believe an energy drink will make you stronger, it just might. Even if it's just club soda. It's a great trick our minds play on us. So all we did was tear the labels off of club soda bottles and stick on our own. Whip, would you fall for that? Would you actually feel stronger after a few gulps. You will be amazed.
What we got going on right here is the Whipped Energy Challenge. We're promoting a new drink, and it shows immediate results. Who wants to step up and take it? It's totally free.
First up, we invite our passers-by to test their strength with a classic carnival high striker. Swing the mallet, try to ring the bell.
7. Now, Keith, that's respectable. It's not stellar. Sashir is going to give you some whiffs right now, and we will increase your performance. Whiff.
So Keith chugs the whiff, and I tell him some highly convincing nonsense about what's in it.
It was discovered by Philip Monroe, who won the Tour de France in 1998.
Then we get him to shake his thing, get the whip pumping through those veins.
Punch all those distractions out of your life. But don't punch me. Alright, punch everything else out.
Back to the high striker to see just how much stronger whiff has made him. Will he get a better score?
Stand back, boys. Keith is on fire. Yeah! 10.
Ding dong. Just like that, Keith has become a strong man. If you're wondering if we rigged that high striker, the answer is absolutely not. It's the placebo effect at work, and Keith fell for it.
And also tonight, I think one of the most terrifying things I've ever tried to do, I tried to marry a total stranger, someone we pull off the street. I tried to marry that person to one of our co-hosts. The results, shocking, astonishing, unbelievable.
Any thoughts on that? How many of you have heard placebo before? Yeah, a lot of you have. Hey, could someone just kind of give me an example for maybe where you've seen placebo in your real world context? Just trying to think of one. Josh, go ahead.
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Real world, yeah.
Okay. Remember
You're good, man. I'm not judging.
Remember the liquid luck? Harry had. He said he gave it to Ron for the tryouts, but he didn't. But like Ron thought he had it, so he played really well, but he didn't give it to him.
This is good. I'm giving a ticket on that. Real world, right there. I love that. Did someone else
Harry
give me
Potter's
one, Claudia?
Well, I've heard that melatonin doesn't actually do anything to like make you fall asleep from
Yeah.
like a lot of people. And I used to take like melatonin gummies to fall asleep, and then I like stopped taking them, and it didn't really have an effect. So I would think that like it doesn't have an effect on the way you sleep.
That's really intriguing. I like that. Emily and then Fiona. I'm gonna go to both.
People who are gluten free, sometimes they might like blame their symptoms on like the gluten, and then they start eating foods with it, and they turn out that they're fine.
I see judgment here. I don't want to. I don't know.
She did that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Claudia? No, we won't go there. We'll go Fiona.
My mom does this to my brother. She has decaffeinated tea that she gives him in the morning, and he thinks that it's caffeinated, so he gets up and he actually like is more energetic in the morning if he gets his tea. So.
That's hilarious. Just from a mental standpoint.
Yeah.
I think caffeine's a huge one. Yes.
Mine was about caffeine too. Sometimes if my mom like tells my stepdad to get her like a latte or something like that, he'll get it like decaf for coffee and all of that. So then she'll think that she has it and she'll like act better,
Yeah.
like more energized and stuff, but there's actually nothing in it.
That's crazy. Yeah, all of these things are awesome ideas, and you see it all the time, okay? And let me give you an illustration. I love this one. How many of you know where Gatorade was founded? Where, Charles?
Florida Gators. Like two.
Yeah, two researchers, right? And then what they did was they said they wanted Florida to play better. So they started putting this on the sidelines and told their players that they actually would play better if they drank this stuff, okay? And so I wanted to throw out something just real quick on an experimental design on maybe a way that we could use this without using the placebo, and then one where we could. So if we have 100 subjects, what is the one thing about an experiment we always start with? Random assignment. Good. Okay? Random assignment. All right? Then what do we do?
Put them in the two groups, like the control and the experimental.
Yeah, so we have a control and an experimental, right? And who gets the treatment?
Experimental.
This is where the treatment is. And how many go each place? 50-50, good. Okay. Cool. And then after this, right, the control group and the treatment group, we then, once we put them into group 1 and group 2, I kind of already said this, and my apology, but we would say that if this is group 1, or group 2, I'm sorry, and this is group 1, what do we do after this? Well, we actually give them the treatment, right? We give them the treatment. So over here, this would be like the treatment, and then what would be over here? This would actually be no treatment, but I heard what you said, Ivana, right? We're going to come to that in a second. That's a great thought. So once we do this, what do we do at the very end? We compare. That's important to state, okay? All right, so here's the deal. When I look at this, there's a little caveat in this experiment that's not great. Think about it this way. If the 50 people that got the treatment of the Gatorade heard that this is going to increase their performance, and these people that are the control group, which get nothing, heard that this increases performance, subconsciously you are creating bias within your mind that states what? You're going to increase your performance. So if we were really going after this in the appropriate way, we wouldn't, Ivana, you said it, we wouldn't actually call this the control group. This would be the group that will receive the placebo. They're actually receiving a treatment. Their treatment is a placebo. Maybe it's something that tastes like Gatorade that doesn't actually have the electrolytes in there, right? Or whatever we're trying to test in that. And then once we compare, the results would be more valid, decreasing or taking out that bias that's there. Does that make sense? Cool? No? It does? Good. All right, so here's the question. Why do you think the people in the video got stronger? We already said this, right? We already kind of went into that. Say that again. Yeah, they believed it, right? Hold up. Yeah, that's probably a bad color there. There we are. Hold up, bring out an ink. There we are. They believed they would. The mind is a powerful thing. We could spend a whole class on that. How your mind is powerful. It is powerful, okay? Cool. Wynn and Tony, you all with us too? Just make sure you're with us. This is called our placebo effect, all right? We don't have a lot of notes today, but what we do have, we want to make sure we go through. All right, similar to the video, Coach Jay wants to use a beverage test to affect, y'all stated it, the effect of caffeine on heart rate. Here's the initial plan. We're going to measure initial heart rate, give each student some caffeine, wait for a specified time, measure final pulse rate, and compare final and initial results. That's my kind of outline of my study. So what are some problems with this plan? Throw it out there.
You don't know like who your group is that you're testing.
Yeah, who am I testing? I like it.
Not everyone has the same pulse rate.
Not everyone has the same pulse rate. Good.
Someone could have a pacer.
Say that again.
Someone could have a pacer.
Yeah, so we could say that, I'll kind of put it in this, pulse rate, or you could have like a pacer that could affect that as well. Good. Are there any other problems you see here?
He's only measuring students, and you just said effect on heart rate, which means you need like a lot of different types of people, not just students.
Yeah, so we need now.
Ages.
Yeah, various ages, especially if my analysis would go to those people, right? So if I only drew from teenagers, my analysis can only be stated, my cause and effect relationship can only be stated on teenagers, right? So it could be on multiple different groups of people. Good. Multiple people. Like groups of people. That's good. Good. Claudia?
Would it definitely be like you're giving the Coke to everyone? So like you won't know what someone who hasn't had the caffeine, like what their pulse rate will do over the time.
Yeah, so I'm kind of testing everyone. So I'm not really comparing anyone together, right? So it kind of comes back to this, who am I testing? I have to have two different types of people to compare, right? So kind of putting up here, kind of goes off this, different groups to compare, right? Cool. Fiona, you got something?
Yeah, last one. So sometimes people can be affected by caffeine differently. Like for us, because we're younger, we haven't really been exposed to caffeine as long. Like 1 cup of coffee might make us more energetic, but someone who's older, it might take 2 or 3.
It's really good. Yeah, so it depends on how it affects you, right? I love that. And it kind of said something along with that Fiona brought up and a couple other people brought up. Not just caffeine. What about sugar? Does sugar affect it? We're not really taking that into account, are we? Right? So we can also say, and I know I'm putting a lot here. I'll come back to this. Sugar impacts heart rate too. Okay? It impacts heart rate too. Okay? Torrance, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were talking to me.
Oh, no.
Okay. All right, so sugar impacts heart rate too. Also, the fact that you're getting caffeine, does that impact your heart rate?
Yeah.
Why? Perfect. So people know they are getting caffeine. That's a problem, isn't it? How many of you know, like when I get a cup of coffee, I just know that I'm about ready to go crazy here. And it could be decaf, but if in my mind I think that, again, like the placebo effect, a little bit different, that could positively or negatively impact me. Okay, let's look at this part. Hey y'all, is everything okay? Okay, let's make sure we're good. All right, so here we go. You ready? If people know that they are getting caffeine, what is one way that we can solve that problem?
Don't tell them.
We don't tell them. And if we do that, what do we call this? We call it blind. Good. So good point. We call this, when the people or the subjects don't know, just kind of throw something out to the side, we say it's blind. Does anyone know?
People don't know?
I thought this.
If the subjects don't know they're getting caffeine, we call that blind. So if people don't know what they're actually getting, that's blind. Coming back to this illustration, maybe the treatment group, we don't use a placebo, but we just simply, we put electrolytes in their drink somehow where they wouldn't have an idea of knowing. Cool? Which could be ethically incorrect, which I understand. But that is a possibility. We could have a blind. Does anyone know what a double blind is? Just raise your hand real quick. Let's just, Lawrence, go ahead, my man.
When the researchers or the people being tested, like, they don't know what, they don't know, like,
You said just finish it off. Neither of them know what.
There's certain which ones it
What I'm giving out, right? We don't know. If I did that, that means that when I hand it out, I realized I labeled this wrong. This is really bad. Why'd y'all not catch me on this?
But you're right.
Okay, I'm trying to
I didn't realize that. Thank you. Some of you are paying attention. When I handed it out, I would have no idea, and neither would the subjects know. That is called double blind. We'll come back to that here in a bit. All right, the next thing is,
That's a bad
I know it is. Ass is a bad word. We do not say that in here.
No,
Okay.
we don't.
We don't. It's in the Bible, though. King James Version. Sugar might increase. It's true. It's true.
Seven Furious can have a podcast.
We won't use this one. We're not going to. We are not using this podcast. If you are in administration and you're hearing this,
Keep it.
Wait, can you at least get to our group chat?
what's that?
Send it in the group chat.
What?
The podcast.
The podcast? I'm scared. I'm putting it up. I'm putting it up. I don't care. What are they going to do? Fire me?
Oh, you're getting bold.
I apologize again. I apologize.
The answer is yes, by the way. Yes.
This is true.
Give me back my ticket.
All right. All right, let's. I can't do this anymore. This is great. All right, sugar impacts heart rate too. So think about this. We're not just controlling caffeine. That's a problem in this study. Got me? In order for this to be effective, just put this over on the side. We've got to make sure we control variables. Got me? Control the variables. What's my treatment? What am I trying to show? We don't want other things coming into my study. We control the variables. Okay? And then the third word that I wanted you to get from this was if there's nothing to compare it to, we need different groups to compare to. We call that group we compare to the what? We talked about this. We call this the control group. Okay? Control group. Nice. Nice, nice. Okay. So we've done number 3. Now we're going to go into our final part here. And we get out, 45? 55. Oh, Gucci. Good. Good. Okay. Number 4. This is the next part that I want you to do. Similar to what I see over here, this is a design of an experiment. Okay? Now, for your quiz on block day, let me make sure you understand this. Okay? Block day, there will be a quiz over 4.2. Okay? You'll need to be able to do 2 things. You need to know these 2 things. Number 1, you'll need to be able to design an observational study from 4.1. It's very similar to what we've already done, right? Simply do either stratified or cluster or an SRS. The second thing you got to do is be able to form an experiment similar to what I did over here and be able to actually talk about it by analyzing and writing it down. So before I go into an experimental design or study, I first take this, got me? I start with my 100, I random ask this, and then I assign this, and then I go into group 1 and group 2, and then we go from there, okay? That's what we're going to call it from now on. Yes! I can't believe I'm saying this. My tongue's tingling. Feels kind of good. I'm bold right now. I'm standing up.
Is that the first bad word you've ever said, Coach
It is a little bit, yes. It is a little bit. But it feels a little good. Is that bad?
No, that's why you're there.
Let's keep
All right, here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to number 4. I don't know. I feel a little bit risky.
Oh.
I forgot to read God's word this morning. That's what happened. I'm joking. I did. All right. Go to number 4. And if you could design a study real quick with someone next to you. Ready? Go. Yes. All right, here we go. Number 4. Get number 4 down.
I know you're getting more. Okay, Naya, we could start like, cause you just start with like the number you want. So we can say like,
All right, we'll do this first.
I don't know,
Last
100.
one. We've lost control today. This is awesome.
Yeah, like can we make the experiment
And then you split off.
Do they have to be like similar?
Yeah, that's perfect.
I think I bet it doesn't matter the initial, like, but then the others in the 2 groups that split off are similar.
It's a joke. It's a
So
joke.
we're giving a
You know, flesh is on flesh of a boyfriend.
So
Not like that name at all.
Oh,
I like that.
I always, you can still score it. You can just explain it. I think this helps me to explain it. You know what I mean? So because over here, I would say I'd start with the 100 subjects and randomly assign them into groups. 50 in each group. I would then apply one with the treatment, one with no treatment, and this. After a certain point of time, whatever that time is, I would then compare the results at the end and see whether there was actually an effect or not. I would see whether the treatment actually impacted performance or whatever.
So let's do this. Here's like the explanations of it, like right after
We actually have to write after it. For our practice, I'm going to give you partial credit here. I find this helps with what's below. Without this, I'm a yoga girl. I'm a visual learner. If I don't have this, I have a hard time analyzing. All right, you can take how many, it doesn't even give how many people, right? You can take 100 or whatever it may be. It's up to you.
Like giving up.
No, I'm like, giving a cat caffeine will just make it equity. It's a little bit more energy.
Well, is it super hyperfast or like?
Giving the lazy one caffeine will make it.
If you get done with the diagram, try to write down a few sentences on what you just wrote down. Try.
Like, should we say like that line thing?
Yeah.
They don't feel like it's
Well, I kind of can't draw my thing on here.
What are we drawing?
Well, I can't draw anything.
All right, let's see if we can attack this here, okay?
Can I go to my
You may, yes, ma'am. All right, we start with the 100 students. What do we do next?
Then you random assign.
Okay, random assign.
Random ass.
Oh my gosh. There we go. We'll put the I in there just for sake. Okay.
Assy?
Then I go to the random assignment. Y'all are awful. Then I would take it and do what with that 100? Randomly go how many? 50 in each group, and we'll call it group 1 and group 2. Okay? Good. Okay. Once I've done 50 at each group, what do we do with group 1? Good. We'll do a control group. And maybe the control group in this instance would be a placebo. Cool? Giving them something that tastes like Coke, maybe it's decaf or something like that. Okay? And we put that in there. Group 2 would be the what? Yep, this is the treatment. This is the one that's getting the caffeine. Okay? Good. What do I do after a certain period of time? That's important to state. After such and such time, whatever that time would be, we compare. So once we come here, this final one is we compare, and we're comparing what? That's specific. The results, which would be what? When? In this context. I think we said a heart rate. Say that again, I'm sorry. Good, yeah, so we're going to compare heart rate change, right? Heart rate change from my initial to my end, right? What was my first heart rate, and then I get caffeine or my placebo, what's my end heart rate? And that would be the comparison that's here. Now, understand this. I want everyone to look up here.
Compare it like for a certain amount of time or something like that?
Exactly. So after, and it doesn't give a certain period of time, and if it doesn't, then Ryan, you say exactly that. After a certain period of time, we compared the two groups from the placebo to the caffeine and compared the difference between their initial and end heart rate to see if there really was a cause and effect of caffeine on heart rate. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, hey, look up here now. I need eyes right here because this is important. All right, this is the stuff that the last year's group, I don't know if they completely got, and I want to make sure you do. This right here receives no credit on the AP exam. But this is great. I would start with this every time because what this does is this allows me to actually talk about what I'm doing. So it would look like this. I would actually analyze this down below. So I would say I start with 100 students, and I randomly assign them into two groups, 50 in each group. In group 1, I will use that as my control group where I would give them a placebo of caffeine, where they would not know that caffeine was given. And then the second one would be a treatment group where caffeine was given to that second group. After a certain period of time, whatever that time is, like Ryan said, I would compare the change in heart rate from the caffeine group to the placebo group and see if caffeine really did have a cause on affecting heart rate at the very end. Does that make sense? And that's how we would state it. Questions on that? Y'all feel okay on that? Feel Gucci? All right, couple of things, and then I think we'll be heading out here in literally 3 minutes. All right, here we go. Thank goodness. Hopefully I survive this class. All right, here we go. Factor. This is the important thing. Get this down just real quick, a little note. A factor within an experiment. Is there some room down there? I'm sorry. I don't know. Maybe golden nugget. Put that there. Put that on the golden nugget. A factor is a variable that we manipulate that may cause a change in the response. Okay? A factor is something that is manipulated that may cause a change in the response. For instance, could it be that the amount of caffeine would affect that? Could it also impact the fact of the temperature of the drink, whether it was hot or whether it's cold? Things like that are factors within the experiment that may be manipulated to be able to show that this change in response. That's a factor, okay? Now think about this. If we're talking about temperature, right? If we said we're going to keep it at this temperature and that was our factor that we would choose, there are different levels of that, right? So I could have one that's at such and such degrees, one that's at another degrees, one that's at a third degrees. That's called a level. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Y'all have a phenomenal day. I'm going to stop this podcast now. Okay, cool?
You're posting it, right?
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.